Welcome. Thank you for joining us. You know, we've been thinking about the fact that so many students come from all different perspectives to get into this thing and wind up in this thing called yoga. And I think about what brought me to it, and that was, like back in the 2 centuries ago. But what brought me to it really was this coming across this idea, and it was a random book I came across it in, of the koshas. And of the koshas meaning the layerings of the body, and the body and mind and all of these things. And it really intrigued me at the time because I'd not really done much with yoga. I'd not studied philosophy. I'd done a little bit of asana, some hatha yoga in college, but I really was struggling in life, trying to figure out like what life was about, as so many of us do, and I still am. As you know, you poor thing. And so I came across this idea that that these people who had been studying yoga as sages thousands of years ago had concocted or come across or discovered this idea of layering, and layering of body and mind and all of this as a way of sort of understanding and also diving deeply into those mysterious questions like what's this all about. And I think it really sparked something in me because my personality, as you well know, is that I like to have things organized. That's been the problem all these years. And I like to have things organized.
In their koshas.
In their koshas. But I also, once things are organized, then I can really look deeply and lift up the things that are organized and look under them and then look under that and look under that. And that's how my mind tends to work, is to organize things, and then once they're organized, see them somewhat as a whole, but then be able to go in individually and look beneath them.
Look more deeply.
And whenever I think of that, it reminds me of you talking years ago in a class about the kalpa and vikalpa idea, and mentioning a kitchen drawer where you just throw everything in, and it's just kind of, your place is really neat and tidy except for the kitchen drawer. God forbid anybody opens that drawer. And then occasionally you go in and you kind of organize things, or in our case, I organize those things before it gets.
And there's sometimes things that just don't have a category.
They don't have a category.
There's no kosha for them.
It's so distressing to those of us who need categories. And so, and the idea that one of the ways the mind works is that we do that, with things, is that we get them organized and then we let it go, and then we get it organized and then we let it go. And in that process, sort of insight may happen. And so for me, this idea of the koshas, or this organizational principle that was discovered by people, long before there were x-rays and ways of looking at the body and seeing the layers. And obviously people at that time had cut themselves and there'd be blood coming out, and they might have seen legs amputated and would see the layers, but
dead bodies here and there.
But like how this sort of idea over time has evolved into something that is still very, very beneficial in terms of understanding what it is to be human, and how to, sort of navigate one's own personal experience in an sort of infinitely layered world in which we find ourselves. And the world is layered in tangible and intangible ways. And so this sort of base understanding that we too have that sort of organizational principle that we can find a home in to get stable, that can be very interesting. So I'm thinking it would be really wonderful for me and maybe for people who are joining us to hear sort of how were these, what were the first texts that started talking about the koshas, and what do the koshas mean in terms of the sort of sheaths of the body, and then are koshas applied elsewhere, and then as a companion to that, the idea that many of us have looked at and studied in the Yoga Sutra of different layers of mind, of chitta, but also the types of mind, like intelligence, buddhi, and ahamkara, and all of that. So it would be great to sort of get a bigger context of that, and then think, well, what does that say in terms of being able to understand where I am here and now, and so, what do you think? Turn it over to you.
Yeah, when we decided just a few days ago to talk about kosha, and then I was thinking, oh, koshas, there's a famous thing where you have pancha kosha, or the five koshas, and I was thinking, oh, and then I discovered at a Upanishad where there are 10 different versions of five koshas, completely. And then I saw another book called the Ganesh Kosha, which are hugely thick book of just scriptural quotes and other scriptures about koshas.
Koshas meaning, in that case...
Oh, and what is a kosha?
Yeah.
And so basically a kosha can mean a layer, like when you're... but it can also mean a category. Another common translation is like a pocket, like you might have, in your clothing or something. Oh, I'll just put it in there, then I've got it. And I'm sure in the culinary world, there's reference to koshas too. In fact, there are probably some dishes named after koshas.
No, and so many people, and it becomes sort of something that has lost meaning. But people have said, "Oh, yes, it's like peeling an onion," and there are so many foods
so
like
many
that.
layers.
So many layers upon layer upon layer.
And the layers.
And they all make you cry when it's an onion.
Yeah.
Overripe onion.
Yeah, and the koshas are very distinct until you really look at them, and then and start working with them, and then the distinction kind of melts away, and in the melting away of the distinction, there's often this sense of awe or stunning beauty. It's kind of like when in the yoga practice, you have abhyasa, where you're, according to your different categories and things you've decided, oh, this is important, that's not, it's important for me to meditate, and then you're working and working and working, practicing, and then you go, you kind of slide into this understanding, in which you actually see the interpenetration. You see there's the distinction, and then you see the interpenetrating of all the koshas together. And so it's like, and it produces that sense of wonder or awe. And
so the classic sheaths, or the koshas of the body, like Annamaya kosha.
The kind of the classic. When I think somebody says, "Oh, you know the Panchakosha," and is in they are listed very clearly. In fact, the entire last chapter of the Taittiriya Upanishad, which is a wonderfully dense. So if you want something to, test your koshas with, but
it's a
and it lists,
wonderful book.
It's wondrous.
It's relatively short, yeah.
Yeah, and then the commentaries on it
Are relatively long.
Are very, very long, by many of Shankaracharya and other profound thinkers, and so they are the first kosha, and is called Anna, or the Annamaya kosha, it's the layer that's made of Anna, which means initially food.
Or rice even, I think.
Yeah, and it's often, and so you think, oh, this is a profound, and at first you're going, what? That seems silly. But then you look at the body is pretty much composed of food, or in certain environments it can become food. Either for little microorganisms or large large tigers and pythons and things, and so the body or maybe not the body as a whole will be food, and this is the ecosystem of where food becomes food.
Yeah.
In a way.
So and it seems
and the body becomes,
as a novice to think about the sheaths of the body, that Annamaya kosha, Annamaya kosha is the easiest to sort of relate to, because we're always eating, we're always seeing our body react to different foods. We can't have gluten, we have to have this kind of protein, we have to have this kind of whatever, and we can get pretty obsessive about this, keeping us distracted by that layer as if that's where things stop, which to me is quite interesting.
Yeah, and it's an important layer.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't have a body without it.
It'd be hard to communicate.
Yeah, because your mouth is made of food and all of that, and so it's really this insight into the whole ecosystem, and then the whole world of biology and wonder as you look closely. And in fact, there's at the end of the Upanishad, there's a little joyous chant, and the first is, it's aham anam aham, I am food, I am food, I am food, and but then it goes on and it goes through the different.
It sounds like the dog that lives next door comes over to the fence and give it treats.
She wants treats.
More treats, more treats. I don't care about you. I'm food. I'm food.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And then the other sheet, it goes through the other sheets, but the real fun part is that it goes back to that I am, and it's mostly people think, well, that's very materialistic. What do you mean you're the body? Because it's and well, and it gets you to look again. That's me, and then and
then you look beneath the surface, like you look within your own experience beneath the body, and what immediately comes forth in our experience is the breath, or the Pranamaya kosha. And in terms of what was being looked at in those days before the knowledge of the nervous system and fascia and all of these other things, the prana really encapsulated that those scientific, technical layers, just
Yeah, quite
beautifully.
because these practitioners, whoever they were, and they're from many different traditions. What is it that you're actually experiencing right now? And they call it pratyaksha. Which is right in front of your eyes. And then that's very to what is it you're actually. So then they say, oh, it really starts with, what sensations, what are you actually experiencing in the present moment, and it's sensation. And then if you label the sensation, you might not be paying attention to it anymore. And so it's just to get you to look again at the sensation itself rather than the story that it triggers. And so oftentimes, I'll have a pain in my leg or in my hip or my neck or my heart, and it triggers, but then it triggers a story, and then I'm really not paying attention to the sensation. I'm not being mindful of the sensation anymore. And so...
And prana, or sensation patterns, but also, breath patterns, by definition, they are both very, specific, but also empty in a certain way. Like air is pervasive as you breathe it in and breathe it out, the prana in that sense. And so it's very specific, but it's also not so at all, which is, to me, this very interesting step between the Annamaya kosha, which is, sort of tangible, and then the Pranamaya kosha, where you are really experiencing things beyond.
You're experiencing something that is happening right now.
Yeah.
Although we tend then to throw it into a pocket or a category, and then you're not actually paying attention to it anymore.
Right.
You're going, oh, look at me, and you want to put it in a category on your phone as a selfie or something. And so that which you're experiencing, and you experience it as, oh, this is life, this is breath, and then you witness that is what is arising is tied to other stories, but then if you can just pay attention to it or be mindful or practice, again you have that place where the borderline of the category you have to find, because you say, oh, God is prana, or the goddess, she's prana, it's all prana shakti, or it's all the divine, whoever, whatever. And those are also pockets. They're big pockets. Oh, that's the divine, or that's the goddess, or that's the... but they're still pockets.
And when it's as if you dig then into it beneath this layer, where you start noticing that the sensation patterns trigger this process of, in a sense, analytical reductionism,
like, wow.
where you stop the layering process by mind, which then becomes Manomaya.
Yeah, so
kosha.
The next layer, the next kosha is Manomaya, or just mind. And it's referring to, mind is a great storyteller. So pretty much, it categorizes things, which is all more pockets inside of pockets, but it creates very complex stories based in, oftentimes, there's they're pretty true stories. It's just like when you try to tell history to somebody, and you can get lost in infinite details that are really irrelevant to the situation at hand. Or you can actually, when you actually study history, then you're looking at so many layers to see what is it that's important that we see and know and understand. Even though you're making theories about, and oftentimes good theories, not always bad theories about it. And when if you think politically, you got to think, oh, history could be important, and history, of course, relates to the word for flesh also, in Greek, histos, and so it's embodied in our interchange, with each other, and so Manomaya.
Yeah, and just talking about history makes me think of one of our favorite commentators in this current time, Heather Richardson Cox, who is this amazing historian who writes just every single day except Sundays about history as it's relating to the current times, brilliantly showing how, number one, patterns repeat themselves, but in terms of the koshas or the layering, what she is so adept at pointing out is how these stories, how the mind, the Manomaya, kosha of all of us showing up in history, how that really can give us insight into previous layers, like the layer of the moment that we might think of as the Annamaya kosha, the layer of the breath, which we might think of as the sort of energetic or time encompassing layer, and that these stories that we are bound to create, and that in fact, if you keep track of history, are there for almost like guidance. Like, here's what has happened in the past, and when that statement that, oh, history repeats itself comes up, it's like history repeats itself because we've forgotten to learn from history. We've forgotten our own histos, our own body, our own history of layers.
In the Annamaya kosha, there's things go in a circular pattern, kind of like night and day. But if you've ever noticed, it's actually spiraling if you look close, and so there is an evolution.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's an evolution, and we can learn, actually to be nice to each other, is wonderful, which opens the whole creative potential for all kinds of minds.
Yeah.
And an interesting sideline, an interesting point in the Bhagavad Gita is that Krishna kind of presents himself. He is the pure consciousness, but he is also the things that people think of him as also can evolve, and that he's much more concerned with people actually seeing the reality, or seeing the truth of inside of each other, rather than turning him into an autocratic dictator, which, of course, you make a solid category. Oh, there's the boss. You are the boss, and okay, whoa. And instantly, and we then deny the deeper mind, creating all of these shadows for that theory, and you deny that the shadows are any part of you, because you want to appear as loyal. And so from the...
Or you don't want to take the responsibility to think and to act and to check in to your koshas, to your layers, because it's within the koshas, isn't it? Like within it's when you've reached the Manomaya kosha, which is the sort of reasoning mind, correct? And the mind that when you've reached that, you can just theorize and detach from the physical body or the prana body. And in doing so, you then don't have to deal with the physical sensations, the sort of prickliness of
the fear.
of being in the face of something that is sort of questioning your ethical underpinnings, your conscience arising. When you're above that, because you're in your mind, you don't have to do that. And that's when, that's when this sort of dynamic of, I'm not going to think, I'm going to turn it over to someone else, becomes very dangerous because you've stepped outside of this layer.
And you can see that even in yoga, we think, I need to experience chitta vritti nirodha. And which I shouldn't judge it, but the shallow interpretation is that I got to stop my mind because my mind is crazy. Okay. And everybody has had that thought, occasionally.
Maybe. Not most people.
Oh yeah, maybe not.
Maybe not everyone.
That's the problem. And so the next kosha after Manomaya is Vijnanamaya. So jnana is wisdom. Vijnana means specific, cutting deep wisdom, and
so would that kosha, in terms of an embodied state, is that kosha something that is this sensation pattern, this physical response to discernment or to insight, or like how would you describe that in terms of like how do you recognize it if you had a flash of Vijnanamaya kosha connection? How would you identify it?
You would actually see interdependence between different levels, different layers of whatever it is you're observing. And you don't have to be observing galaxies or, the movement of the stars. It could be something microscopic, and it doesn't have to be through a microscope either. It could be just something in your garden, or something crawling on your nose, or just an ordinary, whatever it is throughout the day. You're starting to see its connection to its background. That that it spills out of its own necessary categories that have helped to organize. It doesn't necessarily eliminate them, but it helps you to spill out of them. And so this is good. And so with that Vijnanamaya, the next one is Anandamaya. So it's the kosha, it's the sheath that is basically a joy. It's like, bliss, joy, happiness,
Freedom.
Yeah. And it's and of course, what happens is you get that taste for it, that's stunning taste, and then you instantly want to put it into a category.
It must really irritate you that I'm always putting things in together.
I got to put that into my pocket.
My kitchen drawer, man.
Yeah. But that's normal, and people do that all the time.
Yeah.
And it's and part of the Anandamaya kosha is when you see yourself doing that, to still not think, oh, that's bad, but to see it for what it is. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And even sometimes to see your own stupidity in the face. Oh, here I am, finally the middle path, the awakening, and
I'm putting it into a box.
Yeah, and if you've practiced enough, you'll start to see the mind come up with some kind of wondrous theory about it, which is probably, and it might be stupid, like people who meditate a lot, so I've read, they occasionally have stupid thoughts.
And
or they
not
have,
always.
Not always.
They also have.
Or they have imaginary conversations.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone
else does that
out in the world has ever imagined talking to someone, and when you see that in the Anandamaya kosha, you're just like, you're mindful of it. Mm-hmm. You're not trying to stop it, and so.
And would that really, be the equivalent of what we, so many texts talk about as, all of these things are really divine in nature, and that not the fact that you are categorizing things, that itself is not the divine part, but the fact that it is divine because it's life.
Right, it's mind, and
but the fact that you can begin to see through things, and that you can begin to sort of embrace them as part of the bigger whole, seeing where these sheaths, whether they're within your body, physical body, mind, etc., or just
within your society,
within how you interface and interact with that.
Yeah.
And this experience of Anandamaya kosha, I'm wondering too, would that be similar to what might be described as pure consciousness or pure awareness, or maybe even,
that's the
pure
and the
light
funny
of
thing
void.
within the tradition, the Anandamaya it's basically liberation.
Yeah.
But the fact that you tend to throw it into a category is all of a sudden there you are. It's the mindfulness has temporarily ceased, which has probably happened, a few times. And when you see that, and if you become conscious of that, that is, you're awestruck with how that happened. In other words, you're seeing this pattern because you're, and so there's, I'm just thinking at the beginning of the Yoga Sutra, it's another five koshas, and these are the chitta vrittis, and as we all know, the chitta vrittis, we want to suspend them. Initially, you want to get rid of them, and then eventually, and it depends on the school of interpretation.
And so chitta vrittis, for those people.
Oh yeah, it's the vritti is the twistings of the chitta or the mind, and so the vritti is you have something and then you have the name for it, and it could be, and you twist them, and so you get the name and the form confused, and it can happen
instantly.
Little bits, and then you can get big messes. Yeah. It's like, oh, and so they define yoga, and it's a very challenging definition, as you want the nirodha of the chitta vritti, you want the or I translate it as suspension, rather than the squashing. or the elimination. And I think, and defend.
Stick with that.
I'll stick with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good because it's like when you go on a diet.
Yeah.
If you say I can't have such and such, that's all you can think about.
Yeah.
And then your diet, maybe you have good strong will and you don't have it until you have it, and then the diet's over and it never worked. And that's this sort of silliness that this kind of game we play with ourselves sometimes of, this is bad, rather than being able to see the sense that, whoa, this is
If
what
you
it
actually
is.
see what's going on,
Yeah.
you don't need to erode it
Yeah.
in the negative sense. It will automatically enter suspension and then reappear, and it's considered wow. And the patterns of the chitta-vrittis, if you can observe them, they're stunning, and that will cause the actual suspension or nirodha of it, and that's a whole another thing. But this is first 5, and what's the first one? Pramana, which means correct perception, and there are different ways of having correct perception, and one of them is the testimony of somebody reliable. It's just, how do I know what's going on down the street there? And in most cases, somebody could tell you and save you the trouble of
Walking down to see.
Yeah, Praman. And then Viparaya is misperception. It's just getting it wrong. In other words, and not wondering about the motivation, but you just see something and you misperceive it. And even, great sages, and have misperceptions all the time throughout the day. It's like looking at, a reflection of something in the window, and you think, oh, that car is going the wrong way down the street. And you say, oh, that's the reflection of the car. And you go, oh. And so there's just misperceptions. And then the next one, vikalpa, is imagination. And an imagination, as we know, there's might be two-sided or many sides to that. But it's the ability of the mind to really create stories. And a lot of our, say biographies and things are largely vikalpa. But that layer interfaces with the other, because, you want to have some actual historical facts and then stories and get rid of and so the vikalpa is this amazing power of the imagination. And, there's some schools who expand the definition that the entire universe is vikalpa. But it's not your vikalpa, it's our vikalpa. Which gives it more profundity if you see that you're in it with everybody. And then, the next one is nidra. That's the 4th chitta-vritti, and that means deep sleep. Not sleep with dreams, which is the kind of sleep you usually can remember. I was this or that, and we've all experienced this, now and then, a little bit of deep sleep, and it's not bad. And then, of course, there's some people think, well, that's it, it's like when you croak, it's just like going into deep sleep. And you think, that's an interesting theory. But smriti is the final one, and smriti is always translated as memory, but it's the word Smriti means mindfulness, not memory in the sense of I have a good memory because I can remember when I was a kid and someone picked on me at school, and you never let go of that. That isn't what they mean by memory. It's the same as the Pali word sati in Buddhism, which is the word for being mindful, which is the ability to keep looking at what is arising in the present moment without taking off on a story about it. And that's much of the discipline of meditation, is being smriti, being mindful of often just the prana patterns, and that's a huge one in yoga, is the sensation patterns, and then also becoming mindful of, thought patterns. And you're able to just look at it again and stay with it in the present moment.
And this idea of smriti and its interfacing with nidra, with deep sleep, is fascinating, because the deep sleep, as we know, that's the time when within the the brain has all these fluids and everything washing through it and sort of giving it a boot, rebooting the brain for the next day. And in that process, there's this sort of spaciousness that's created, that, isn't negating these other states of mind where you've perceived things accurately or inaccurately, where you've fixated on something or tried to, ignore something, all these other states that we go through, but where it's the ultimate vairagyam, putting it down, letting the mind become free of its nature or of the impact of its nature, which is to become over-churned, overworked, and then you let it kind of stabilize. And then that's when you get into this final state where you can truly deeply meditate, where you can deeply have what in other forms of looking at the mind, you can have the vijnana, or you can have buddhi, where you have intelligence, that nature of mind, where you see the complexity, but also the luminosity of things.
Yeah, and you get to the samadhis, and depending on historically as to how the term is being used, but you come into that stage where your breath naturally stops because you're basically awestruck by, and if you say beauty, that's not, anything you say is like, it's better than beautiful, and because it includes all the things that aren't, it's just like the whole thing is much more amazing than we can define in our categories. And even in the poetry of all of these songs and texts and incredible music and meditation techniques, it's like, and then you just go, and you fall into the middle path, which is the different samadhis. And so it takes practice.
Yeah. It really is just this sort of process of layering and peeling away layers, but then not discarding the layers. It's almost full, undulating layers that then move and other things are revealed on all different levels, whether it's the defined as the koshas, defined by the Yoga Sutra as these, as the chitta, etc. It's this, it comes back to that thought of, these people thousands of years ago who were deeply sincere and very, very curious about wanting to know what it means to be human and who we really are, what we're here for, and what life is all about. And you often say, and I love this because it's so true. It's that the people who wrote these texts or who began to tell them as stories before they were written down, they were like the far out people of those times. They were the thinkers, the mystics, the people who, others thought, well, he's a little weird, she's a little odd, and but they were deep and they were cutting edge. And so for that time, they were like the hip people. And then we one comes into this world and you think, oh yeah, I'm going to be cutting edge, I'm going to be hip, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. And if you really look back in history, like we were saying, and look at the people, whether it's in ancient Hindu traditions or Buddhist traditions or other religious traditions or even philosophical traditions, where people were accurate and inaccurate in the way they perceived things. They were the thing that ties them together, that makes them inspirational to me, is that they were sincere, that they really, truly wanted to solve some of these problems and not then say, I got it, it's mine, I'm not sharing it with anyone. They wanted
that
people.
happens occasionally.
Yeah, but the ones that survived, for the most part, not all of them, but the ones that survive generations and generations and generations are the ones that really someone in our day and age, or some generation, whatever it is these days, X or Q or what, Z or whatever it is, that they come along and they say, wow, this is the new angle that I'm seeing because of that, and let me add my 2 cents worth. And so that's why these teachings and being able to take something like the koshas, which which catch your interest. For me, when I first was getting into yoga, it was like, wow, what's this about? And then years and years and years later, still saying, what's this about? Rather than taking it, the koshas, which often can happen, and you have to have an article in this magazine or a book on that shelf that has said this is what they are, and memorize it and regurgitate it. And that's where these great teachings that could be inspirational just,
They become dogmatic.
Yeah.
They reinforce the ego principle.
But
So
it's not
ego rather than a creative
yeah.
principle, because you don't identify with the ego, so to speak. And that way you can see what a huge ego you might have.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have egos.
That's
So
right.
I've read that. And,
Yeah.
and huge. I mean, as big as the imagination can be. I'm bigger than the universe. I'm the supreme, not only this universe, but of an infinite number of
I've been working on that with you for years.
And you can, put it up on your Instagram or whatever.
Whatever it is. I think Instagram may be on the way out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Make your AI thing about it.
And that it's essential to the creative principle. But when you actually feel this connection, which is in the Anandamaya code, you start to feel the connections, then it becomes much more amazing than you think.
Yeah.
And there's no, who's to say what the limit on what we can do is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, it's a topic that's worth looking at again and again, both in writing and looking at the Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad. And then, did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Yes. And then also really letting these kinds of ideas sit and set with you a little bit, because they're not put out there necessarily to be definitive end-all categories and ways of seeing things. Although there's a certain element of that to them, they are really something that can provide inspiration, so that you don't have to talk about it. You don't have to define it. You feel it. You experience it in the sheath of the body that is the physical body. And then there's some element when we feel truth that makes this sort of experience seem like, I don't have to explain this,
Yeah.
because
It's like
it's
trying
true.
to explain the beauty of nature
Yeah,
to someone. It's like,
yeah. You can get close, but you can't do it.
yeah, better just say, hey, take a look.
Take a hike.
And the breath stops temporarily. Sometimes I suppose you could be so overcome that your last breath, but
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So we hope you enjoyed this, got something out of it, can experiment a little bit with it. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
thank you so much.